Beneath towering green cliffs, a lone warrior cuts through the winding waters in a canoe built for three. His paddle strikes the surface with urgency. He is alone, but he did not set out that way. The 8 companions who once journeyed with him have vanished, seized by pale, bearded men, armed with shining weapons and heavy shields. He does not need to guess their fate. He presses forward, heart pounding, until the familiar shoreline of his village appears. As his canoe scrapes against the earth, he leaps ashore and calls out. Faces emerge from the lodges, eyes wide with silent questions. He tells them what has happened, the ambush, the captives, the strange invaders who came from the sea, speaking a language unlike any they've ever heard. But this is not a people who cower. The warriors' words ignite the village into action. Spears are gripped, bows are strung, a war party gathers. These are men and women who have hunted the forests, who have fought rival tribes, who know this land better than any outsider ever could. The invaders will soon learn this land is not empty. It has never been empty. Long before these pale strangers appeared, long before any sails touched these shores, his people had already conquered a journey greater than any Viking expedition. Their ancestors had once lived on the great Eurasian continent, moving with the herds across frozen landscapes, braving winds that could strip the flesh from bone. They hunted mammoths and bison, crossed great tundras, and in time reached a land untouched by human feet, a world where no one had ever stood before them. As the ice receded and the ages passed, the bridge that connected them to their ancient homeland disappeared beneath the sea. For thousands of years the people of this land lived, thrived, built nations, raised families, and walked the forests and plains, knowing no master but the earth itself. They had no reason to believe that another world still existed beyond the horizon. And yet today on this very land new faces have arrived, clad in iron, riding upon wooden dragons, believing themselves to be the first to set foot upon these shores. They are wrong. They are not the first. They will not be the last. And they will soon understand this land has always had protectors. For millennia the earth had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the ebb and flow of languages, the birth of new peoples, and the death of old empires. Prophecies and faith were passed down to the winds, carried by the voices of ancestors. But then came the Vikings, a people who disrupted an ancient silence, bridging a gap that had lasted tens of thousands of years. These northern warriors from the cold lands of Scandinavia had ravaged the coasts of Europe, leaving their mark on the world with swords and shields. But their conquest reached further, across vast oceans, to lands they knew nothing about, lands that had been untouched by their kind for ages. This was the moment when the separation between two worlds was shattered. 8 of the Native American captives were killed by the Vikings, taken by force in their first brutal encounter. The invaders were not interested in peace. They were on a mission to claim what they did not understand. At the heart of this invasion was Thorvald Erikson, one of the brothers who carried the Viking bloodline. His brother Leif Erikson had sailed to the American coast before, but had failed to meet any resistance or even encounter the land's first people. However, now as they approached the shore, a swarm of indigenous canoes appeared on the horizon, their silhouettes cutting through the water, preparing for a battle. The Vikings, startled by the sight of those who lived in harmony with the land, gathered to their ships for cover. The sky darkened with a flurry of stone-tipped arrows beating relentlessly against their raised shields. The rain of arrows continued for what felt like an eternity. Yet when the battle ceased, the indigenous warriors retreated into the waters, their message clear. They would not back down. But it was not over. The battle had taken its toll. As Thorvald Erikson stood tall amidst the aftermath, a single fateful arrow struck him down. His life ebbed away, and with his last breath, he ordered his men to lay him to rest in the land he sought to conquer. 2 crosses placed at his head and feet marked his final resting place in a land he would never truly claim. And so, the Viking warriors, having fulfilled their captain's dying wish, returned to the settlement established by Erikson. But they were not victorious. They left this new world behind and sailed back to Greenland with the arrival of spring, the land's people still standing strong and unbroken. Soon the quiet waters are disturbed once more. From a distance, the sound of iron clinking fills the air, and plumes of smoke rise lazily into the sky. Dragon boats, those long ships with their serpent-like prows, glide along the water's edge. Thorfinn Karlsefni, a Viking leader, has arrived, bringing with him nearly 70 settlers, a mix of Christians and pagans alike. The sea has favored these newcomers, bringing with it a beached whale, a gift from the ocean, which provides them with food to endure the long winter. In the warmth of their newly built sod houses, they find temporary shelter, unaware of the challenge that awaits them. As the season shifts, something else stirs. Out of the dense woods, figures emerge, silent at first but unmistakable. The indigenous peoples have arrived. At first, they are hesitant, their eyes cautious upon the sight of the Norse bull, a strange creature to them, a symbol of the invaders' power. But soon, they open their packs and present warm pelts from the land's fauna, an offering and a gesture of peace. There's an exchange of looks, a moment of uncertainty. The Norsemen, unsure of how to communicate, fumble through their gestures. Karlsefni, a man of resolve, makes it clear that there will be no trade of iron weapons, the weapons that have brought destruction across many lands. Instead, he offers them something different, the milk of their livestock, a gift of sustenance, yet one that might seem strange and foreign to the people who have lived in harmony with the land for so long. This first encounter is more than just a meeting of peoples. It is a clash of worlds. Each side offer what they hold dear, try and understand each other's needs and values. Soon after the first encounter, a stir can be felt along the shores. The distant toll of iron, the faint plumes of smoke, and the sight of dragon boats cutting through the water signal the arrival of a new force. Thorfinn Karlsefni, the Viking leader, has brought with him a group of nearly 70 settlers, both Christian and pagan. It seems that the gods have smiled upon them as they find a beached whale, a gift from the ocean, to sustain them through the long, cold winter. Settling into their sod houses, they build temporary homes, much like the earth itself, seemingly meant to disappear over time. They are unaware, however, that their arrival has not gone unnoticed. In the fall, the native people return, this time in greater numbers. Their presence once again stirs a tense reunion. At first, the exchange is hesitant, each side unsure what to make of the other. Iron and steel are not familiar things to the indigenous people, yet the Vikings offer them this strange beverage, milk from their livestock. The native people, having felt the pull of their traditions, offer warm pelts in exchange. However, as the Vikings and the native people attempt to communicate, misunderstandings arise. One of the indigenous warriors, perhaps moved by curiosity or desperation, attempts to seize one of the Vikings' iron weapons. In an instant, he is struck down, dead by the Viking's hand. This violent act changes everything. The native people flee, but the Vikings, led by Karlsefni, know that this cannot go unanswered. They anticipate retaliation. With cold precision, Karlsefni orders his men into a forest, where the next chapter of this encounter will unfold. Using the land itself as their advantage, the Vikings use their superior weapons and tactics to lure the native people into an ambush. The tomahawks and arrows of the native warriors meet the axes and shields of the Vikings. In this brutal clash, the Vikings overpower the indigenous warriors, leaving many of them dead in the woods. As the seasons change, Karlsefni's expedition stayed in their newly established settlement throughout the long winter. With the arrival of spring, they packed their ships with American grapes and pelts, gift from the land itself, and prepared to leave. This chapter of their journey comes directly from the saga of the Greenlanders, one of the two Icelandic sagas that document the Vikings' attempts to settle in Greenland and venture further westward. Though Leif Erikson had previously made landfall on the American coast, he did not encounter any indigenous people. However, Karlsefni's journey was destined to bring more tension. The Vikings had come to lands they called Markland, Helgeland, and Vinland, but these territories were not uninhabited, as they soon discovered. In the fall, the indigenous people returned, this time in greater numbers. They came with more pelts, and the air was thick with the tension of a reunion that would not be as peaceful as the first. Though the Vikings initially traded, this time it was different. The tension between two worlds became undeniable. One of the Native American warriors attempted to take one of the Vikings' iron weapons. The Vikings, seeing the weapon as something sacred and untouchable, reacted swiftly and brutally. The warrior was struck dead. His fall marked the beginning of an irreversible conflict. In fear, The rest of the native people fled. But Karlsefni knew retaliation was coming. He understood that the fight for survival in this land was just beginning. The Vikings, confident in their steel, were prepared for the next encounter. Karlsefni, knowing the indigenous warriors would not back down, devised a plan to lure them into the forest, where the Vikings could use their superior weapons and tactics. The Vikings set their trap, drawing the warriors deeper into the woods. The confrontation was inevitable. As the battle unfolded, tomahawks and arrows clashed with axes and shields. The native warriors, skilled in the ways of the land, fought fiercely, but the Vikings' weaponry and tactics proved too much. In the end, the Vikings scattered the indigenous warriors, leaving many of them dead in the woods. In 1960, archaeologists in Newfoundland uncovered mounded ruins, ancient traces of a past long forgotten. The excavations revealed remnants of sod houses, an iron forge, and chopped wood, all dated back to the year 1021. These discoveries provided solid proof that, centuries before Columbus, the Vikings had settled in these lands. They had likely interacted with indigenous peoples, trading and perhaps even traveling as far south as Maine or New York. However, after only a few years of presence, the mighty Vikings abandoned their colony, a retreat from the bountiful land they had hoped to conquer. The sudden withdrawal from Vinland has puzzled historians for centuries. The tentative mapping of their journey suggests that the Vikings likely encountered the ancestors of the Beotic or Dorset peoples, native groups whose fierce resistance may have been the reason behind the Vikings' abandonment of the land. The saga of Eric the Red paints a picture of a failed conquest, as it describes how the Vikings could never truly live in peace or freedom from fear due to the native inhabitants. Their return to Greenland was not out of desire to leave, but out of necessity, a forced retreat from the land they had hoped to claim as their own.